Well, hello, slingers. Welcome to another Wordslinger podcast, and we're chatting with another thriller writer. You're not going to want to miss this interview with Joseph Finder. Stick around.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Well, I am Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger. Among other things, podcaster, thriller writer. That's the part that I like best, is being a thriller writer. A novelist, a writer. It's hard to throw one solid label on my career. Because I do so much. I do so many different things, and there's so many different types of writing in my life. But I do enjoy writing a good thriller novel. And I also enjoy talking to other thriller writers. And that is why I'm very excited about this interview with Joseph Finder. I kind of talk about this, and I think I mispronounced his last name when I first introduced him in the clip. So sorry about that. but we work it out. But here's the deal. Joseph was on the Writers Inc. podcast a few weeks ago, and I did not reach out to him. His PR agency reached out to me to schedule an interview, and I'm happy to do it. And I'm kind of glad to do it because there were things. His interview with James Blatch was good, but there was just things I wanted to dive into a little deeper that I wish I had gotten to ask him. So I was really glad to have this opportunity. It's always fun talking to any thriller writer, you know that, because you've listened to the show. You're a diehard fan. You keep coming back. But this one in particular I really enjoyed. So I'm not going to keep you from it. Make sure you stick around for the note at the end after the interview. I'm sure to dive into something interesting there. That I kind of consider that the podcast now. I almost just want to do that most of the time. I love these interviews, but man, sometimes I just want to talk to you. So anyway, stick around for the note at the end and enjoy this interview with Joseph Finder. And I'll see you on the other side. Hey, it's Kevin Tumlinson here, and I want to talk to you about something that's made a real difference in my work over the years, and that is Pro Writing Aid. I've been using this for years. It's hands down the best assistive editing tool that I've found, and what I love most is that it works wherever I write. So whether I'm in Scrivener, Microsoft Word, Substack, or anywhere else, Pro Writing Aid is right there with me. And unlike other tools, I get control over the kind of suggestions it gives me. So there's no rigid rules. It's just smart, actionable feedback that's tailored to my writing. And the best part is that the team behind Pro Writing Aid actually cares about independent writers and creators. They're focused on helping individual creators like you and me, not just big enterprise customers. And that is, unfortunately, becoming a kind of rare thing these days. And that's why I'm proud to support them. So if you're serious about leveling up your writing wherever or however you write, go to prowritingaid.com and use the code KEVIN20 at checkout for 20% off of your subscription. That's prowritingaid.com, code KEVIN20. And trust me, you'll be glad you did. It's a rare event. It does happen, but today's guest was actually recently a guest on another show I co-host, the Writers Inc. podcast. So I'm going to try to not ask you any of the same questions you got last time, Joseph, just so that we can have a fresh, new perspective on your career. But welcome to the Wordslinger podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to be talking about your book, The Oligarch's Daughter. And oligarch is a term that we're hearing a lot right now. So we're going to take that path a little, explore that a little. But I want to talk to you about sort of the way you came to writing, if you don't mind. We're certainly going to talk about the book, but one of the things I'm really interested in right now is what started you in the whole writing process in the first place? Like, how did you come to your career?
Well, I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid,
Hmm.
and um, my parents convinced me that I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah,
And um, I,
similar.
yeah, and so when I was around 10, I discovered this novel by a writer named Eleanor Cameron, kind of a kid's sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
And I really fell in love with it. It was at the perfect age. And I wrote to her, and she wrote back, and we had this sort of pen pal relationship over several years. And that was sort of I asked her all kinds of questions. It was kind of my realization that behind every novel is a human being making all these
Yeah.
narrative decisions. And I sort of thought, that's a cool job. I would like that. So,
That's so you
yeah,
had kind of a mentor.
sort of, yeah. Yeah, when I was little. Yeah,
How fortunate, man. That is I
yeah,
remember trying to write to some of my favorite authors early on and getting kind of canned responses. So the
yep.
fact that you got like interaction, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, my first response was a canned response, was a kind of form letter,
Yeah.
and, but it had her return address on it. And I wrote to her at the return address and I said, but you haven't answered my questions yet. And so she answered with kind of a two-page typed letter answering my questions.
Excellent.
That was the beginning of this back and forth.
Persistence.
Yes,
Do you think that's is that a component of how you got started? Just being
huge,
persistent?
huge, huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to be, as you know well, you've got to be really stubborn in this business and
Hmm.
persistent. And I mean, you've got to listen to people when they give you advice or suggestions or criticism.
Right.
You've got to listen to that without having the wind taken out of your sails, you know?
Yeah. How do you
That's
do
that's
that?
that's the tough part.
Yeah, I'm still working. Hey, I'm 70 books in. I'm still working on that. Like, how do
70
you?
books.
But
Wow.
yeah, but I don't have you've accelerated your career well beyond mine. So numbers don't mean a thing.
My agent would
So,
be thrilled if I had 70 books, believe me.
well, yeah, it's like starting over with every book, though, you know.
Yep,
Um,
it is.
so before you became full time, like what were some of the biggest challenges you faced to becoming a full time writer?
Well, I first of all, I had to learn how to do it.
Yeah,
And so I gave myself 3 years in which I read the greatest thrillers ever written, and I took notes on index cards.
okay,
And I gave myself 3 years, and while I was learning how to write a novel, I was teaching. So I had a job,
yeah,
and um, I wrote my first novel, and it wasn't any good. And I wrote and rewrote and rewrote. I sent that novel to a literary agent who rejected it
yeah,
with a nice note. And I called him up and I said, if you don't mind, would you tell me what you didn't like about this book? And he did. Talked for like half an hour on the phone.
yeah,
And I took notes and I went back to the book and revised it. And this happened several times where I would call an agent, get criticism, and rewrite.
yeah.
And so I ended up rewriting my first novel about 25 times. I had 25 very different drafts of it um, before I got an agent who wanted to publish it.
So this is a serial thing for you. Like
Yeah.
you've this persistence is one definitely a key aspect of it, but like you reaching out. Like I don't think a lot of authors would think to do that. Reach out and
No,
ask for that feedback.
no, I think a lot of authors would just sort of hear that and just say, oh crap, my novel got rejected.
Yeah.
Well, but there's a reason they got rejected, and you've got to learn what those reasons are and make yourself better, make your book better,
Yeah.
So that's sort of my attitude.
Does that, so what were some of the things you learned in that 25 rewrites? I think I just lost half my audience,
Yeah.
just considering that. But, I guess today is different. Things are different now. I probably have rewritten the book 25, 30 times by the time it's done, just because of the way digitally, the way I approach it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what was some of
This
what you
is
were learning there?
this is before computers, don't forget. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I was using a typewriter.
yeah,
So I would do a new draft. I was running it through the typewriter again. So it's
yeah.
so much easier today with computers, so much easier.
I, yeah,
Uh, so,
yeah.
so you asked, what did I learn? I learned um, that my hero has to be someone who is savvy and smart and someone who we can admire. Not necessarily someone we like, but someone we can admire. Um, I learned how to do an opening that grabbed readers um, and set up the book for us. I learned how to do a conclusion that was satisfactory, that felt satisfying to the reader.
Yeah.
Um, and I learned how to tackle that big, long stretch in the middle when between the opening and the conclusion of the book, when you start writing and you don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to shape that in a way where you sort of feel like you're moving from plot point to plot point. I have a sign above my computer that says reverse, reveal, surprise. And
Mm-hmm.
every chapter is going to do one of those three things. Reverse the story in some way, reveal something big, or surprise the reader.
Yeah.
That's another thing I learned.
Yeah. That's those are good lessons. I'm going to jot that down on my little board over my computer here. Reverse reveal surprise.
Yeah.
That's probably some of the best advice I've heard today. Uh, so when what do you think were some of the hurdles then that you had to overcome as you were kind of coming in? I mean, clearly you were getting good feedback. That's good. But what were some obstacles to getting that first book picked up and published?
Um, One of the biggest obstacles was that I was not serious about writing a thriller. In other
Mm,
words, I was writing a thriller, but I was sort of casual about it.
yeah.
And you've got to take it really seriously. You've got to do the best you can to persuade the reader that the reader is in jeopardy of some sort. You've
Mm,
got to torque up the tension as much as possible. And I hadn't done that. I had
yeah.
not the I hadn't sort of gradually built up the tension in the book.
Right.
Another thing I learned.
Do you have some methods now that you use for that? Like tricks that we can borrow from you?
Nothing I can think of right now. I mean, I just sort of I look at, as I told you, I look at each chapter um, with those words in mind. I
Yeah.
look at every scene and make sure that every scene amplifies the tension in one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, and if it doesn't, it has to be cut out. So I'm ruthless in my editing to sort of
Yeah.
make sure that every scene builds on the tension of the one before that.
So yeah, I assume then that you are a an outliner, or are you?
Well, not really.
Interesting.
I outline maybe the first 20% of the book,
Okay.
and before I start to write, I need to know how the book's going to end.
Okay.
So with the opening charted out and the ending figured out, I start writing, and when I get past that 20% that I've outlined, I kind of improvise, let myself go.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that if I surprise myself, I'll be surprising the reader.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the advantage to not over outlining. I knew when I started out, I knew Robert Ludlum because we had the same agent.
Okay.
And
Also handy, man.
yeah, totally, totally. And Ludlum told me to outline every book in detail as much as possible. And he would do outlines of like 150 single space type pages.
Yeah.
So he said, try that. And I tried that with one book. And when I finished the outline, I did not want to write the book.
Yeah.
I was done with it. So that was my way of learning. No, you don't want to over outline,
Yeah.
lose that
That
spontaneity.
that's always been my experience too. And I've always been a pantser, I've always been somebody who just a discovery writer, I guess, would be a better way
Yeah.
to describe it. And I've always found that same experience. Is, if I outline, then I've told myself the story, and now I'm not interested in the story anymore. But
Yeah.
I'm working to get past that. Some
Yeah.
changes.
So I do
The
a lot, I do a lot of fixing in the editing. I'll sort of write a draft
Yeah,
and it'll be kind of wild and woolly, and I will sort of then look at it, let it get cold for a couple of days and look at it and cut where it's not working.
yeah,
So I'll cut a lot of pages out.
yeah. How much of a book do you figure you cut when you're done?
I probably cut maybe 20%.
Really?
Yeah.
That seems like it would hurt.
Oh, it does. It's painful.
Yeah. Do you
Pain-
hold on to any of that stuff? Do you reuse it somewhere?
I used to do that, but now I realize I'm never going to use it. I've got all kinds of odds and ends and scraps and files. I'm never going to.
Yeah.
It just
That's
doesn't belong.
You can that can be some legacy stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. Leave a box of clipped scenes for somebody to
Right.
take up.
Puzzle out. What book was that one from?
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna just send it my way. I'm just gonna start
Yeah.
slapping all those together. I'm just gonna write, the definitive final book for Joseph Finder. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, so was there a point where like just things changed for you? I mean, where you went from struggling, trying to do it, trying to hit, to suddenly you're a international bestseller.
Well, things really changed for me when I sold the movie rights um, for a book called High Crimes,
Yeah.
which was made into a movie with Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd. And it was a good movie, and it opened pretty well, and it brought a lot of readers to me.
Mm.
And this is a point in my career in which I didn't know if I could keep going. And when High Crimes came out and people started reading my books, started buying my books, that made a real difference to me.
Yeah.
So the movies can really help if you have a sale like that.
So that's the secret. Get my book
Be
turned
lucky.
into a movie with Morgan Freeman.
Right. Yeah, get lucky.
Get lucky. Do you think it's purely luck, though? I mean, come on. It had to be a good book, so there had to be a little
Oh,
more than just luck.
yeah, it was a good book. I had a good agent, um, but I had to, it came at the right time in Hollywood. They were looking for a kind of a legal thriller type thing,
Yeah,
um, a la John Grisham.
right.
And so Grisham had sort of opened up the market for that. So it was not, it wasn't just luck, it was also good timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can't
So,
control these things.
right. But you can control what you do afterward,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, was there once you kind of hit that turning point, how did that impact and change your writing and your writing process?
Well, it didn't really change my writing process that much, except that I used to write with movies in mind. And after High Crimes was adapted from my book, and I realized how much they changed, how much they cut out, um, I I realized that I, as a writer of novels, have a kind of a power that the screenwriters do not have. That is, we can get into our characters' heads.
Yeah.
In a movie or a TV series, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I focus more on being in the character's head in my subsequent books.
Hmm. Okay. Do you think that's helped or hindered you in terms of more books being picked up
It has
by
not
Hollywood?
it has not hurt me. It has
Yeah.
not hurt me. Um, then the movie Paranoia was picked up,
Yeah.
one of my books, and
Yeah.
The Oligarch's Daughter has been sold as a TV series.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
and that was not a book that I wrote with a movie in mind at all.
Yeah.
So I
That was
think,
going to be my next question. Is like, when you're writing, are you picturing it on screen, or are you just, focused on telling the best story?
yeah, I mean, I remember I used to hear writers saying, "Oh, I never think about movies," and I would sort of think, "Oh, come on, please."
Right.
But now I realize while I'm writing a book, I'm doing something very different from what a movie does, what a movie can do. And so I don't write with a movie in mind anymore.
Hmm. Interesting. But do you think, I mean, but that it's still adaptable. I mean, you're still putting in the elements that makes someone read that and think this would look good on screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the overall concept has got to be high enough that it works as a TV series or a movie, the
Yeah.
concept of the book itself.
Yeah.
And in my case, the notion of a regular American guy who marries the daughter of a Russian oligarch without knowing she's the daughter of a Russian oligarch, that attracted a lot of interest right away. Just that.
Yeah.
So the concept had to be there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the book a bit. What was what sparked the idea for this? And this was pre Trump, Musk, Biden leaving office, that sort of thing, where the term oligarch has become, it's much more in the public consciousness right now. People weren't
Yeah.
really using that term much before, but
Right. And
what?
my editor and I kind of were a little worried about using the word oligarch in the title of my book.
Hmm,
People know what that word meant, you know?
yeah,
And the timing has turned out to be perfect. That,
yeah,
a couple of days before my book is published, Joe Biden goes on the air and talks about the rise of the oligarchy.
yeah,
So that really helped.
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, okay. I mean, I need to like, can you send me like, I don't know, one of your socks or something that I can just rub for good luck when it comes to this?
Yeah, I sort of feel like I got really lucky with the publication of this book. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was just interviewing A.G. Riddle, who wrote The Atlantis Gene.
yeah,
He also wrote a book back in like I'm gonna say 2019, 2017 maybe, called Pandemic. And so, when certain world events came around, that book blew up because it was just named Pandemic.
yep, yep.
Have you seen it? Do you think now he was saying that he actually saw some backlash from that? Like people actually accused him of, despite it being written, several years before, they accused him of trying to capitalize on the pandemic. Have you had any kind of backlash like that when it comes to Oligarch?
Oligarchs? No, I haven't. Um, I haven't. I mean, the novel really started when I was observing the phenomenon of these very rich Russian guys coming over to the West and buying up the greatest mansions and
Hmm.
yachts and private jets in London and New York. I mean, London was called Londongrad. There were so many Russian
Right.
oligarchs there buying
Right.
up property. Um, and I was kind of fascinated by this phenomenon. And they would give generously and philanthropically to hospitals and museums and schools. And I sort of thought of them as merchant princes.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
And I sort of thought, no, this could be cool. What would it be like to sort of marry into a world of wealth like that? And then the Russians invaded Ukraine,
Yeah.
and the oligarchs were all sanctioned. And they went scuttling back to Moscow, and we seized their yachts, you know.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, oh crap, that's the end of that book. It doesn't work anymore. Until I realized, no, wait a second. I could do two timelines. I could do one before the war breaks out and one in the present day.
Oh, yeah.
And so circumstances forced me to make a narrative decision that turned out to be a really good one. It made the book stronger and more interesting.
That's interesting. And that flexibility, I think that's pretty important
Yeah.
to be able to kind of pivot like that. How much of a disruption was that to the process of writing the book?
Well, it was so bad that I had thought I had to put the book down.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, that's crap. That's the end of that.
Yeah.
So it was a big disruptor at first.
Yeah. So you were not at all energized over the idea of going back to, had you already finished the book when that happened?
No, I was in the middle of writing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I wasn't energized by the war breaking out. I was sort of depressed that it happened and sort of despondent about what was going to happen to my novel, The Oligarch's Daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. So how far along do you think you were
About
in it?
halfway, something like that.
Halfway. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds like though it was sort of serendipitous, because you're halfway through, the war breaks out. You don't have to necessarily waste anything that you've written. You just have to change the ending.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that
Yeah,
was
and you
the
said
thing.
you have to start with the ending. You start by knowing the ending, so that
Yeah.
I feel like that would have caused some anxiety.
Yeah. But it didn't. I mean, I sort of knew how the book had to end, you know? And you'll see when you get to the end what I'm talking about. There's a certain way it has to end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't get the book until just a few days ago, but I've been tearing through it. I'll get to the end of it. I can't
Yeah.
wait. I want to see if I can spot where you had to shift gears.
Yep.
Now that I know,
Yep.
do you think anything like that is obvious in the book? Do you think people would be able to spot that?
I don't think so. I think it's
Yeah,
been revised enough times that nobody's going to know.
yeah. How much did you have to change anything from that you had written in order to accommodate the new ending?
I didn't really have to change very much at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so what comparing your career from when you first started to now, um, you know, how has how have things changed? And specifically, like, how have you changed your perception of success? Because you said you decided, I really want to be a writer. It was kind of a dream.
Yep.
You've you've done that. You've gained success in that. What does success look like for you now?
Well, success means reaching as many readers as possible to
Okay.
me. Um, and new ones in particular. I went on tour for this book, just recently came back, and I met a lot of people who said, I've never read you before. This is my first Joseph Finder book. I want to discover you. And I sort of thought, that is success to me.
Yeah.
is to reach new people who haven't read me before.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. I want to reach a lot of people who haven't read me before.
Yeah,
Several million if I can.
exactly.
So, over the course of your journey, what do you think is the sort of the biggest lesson you've learned uh, in your career?
Um, I guess the biggest lesson I've learned is that this is a serious job. That although we're writing entertainment,
Hmm.
writing something that is diversion for people, we've got to be deadly serious about it.
Yeah.
In order to make the books work, we've got to be really serious about it. And it's hard work. It's hard work to do it well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned.
That's interesting. I interviewed a comedian once who who told me that um, in his view, the most serious people he knows are comedians
Really?
because their whole job is making people laugh and making, but they have to control that and they have to do this, they have to do it in a certain way. And I think the same is true for writers, for all entertainers. This is work and we make it look easy and look fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you know, quick, easy reading is hard writing. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of work. And people who haven't written don't know that. They sort of
Right.
figure if a book is fast, it was written fast.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. It
No.
doesn't work that way.
No, you said you rewrote your first book 25 times. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
yeah. Nobody's going to call that fast. I
Right.
don't I can't imagine. How long did it take you to write that first book?
Oh God. The first one took me like 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about now?
Now I write a book in about a year.
Okay. Is that kind of your pace? It seems like when I talk to authors from the traditional publishing space, a year per book is about what I get on
It's
average.
about what I spend on a book. Although I'll tell you that the Oligarch starter took me about 2 years,
Hmm.
which is unusual because it took a lot of research and
Yeah.
and doing the two different timelines and integrating the two timelines, making them
Yeah.
work together. That was a feat of narrative engineering. It took some time.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine with having to start fresh, basically. Uh,
Yeah.
was there a point in there where I mean, that's an interesting problem to have to overcome. I mean, was there a point in there where clearly you had almost decided to quit? Like, what was it that made you decide, what was the turning point that made you decide I could do this split timeline? Like, what incited that?
I don't know the answer to that. I just sort of thought, man, it's too bad that I didn't finish this book and publish it before the war broke out.
Hmm.
Then I thought, well, what if you set it part of it before the war broke out? Like we can do stuff like that.
Yeah.
We can jigger the narrative around.
Yeah.
So kind of a realization that I didn't have to be bound by the real world timeline, but my own timeline.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, look, we're gonna have to wrap up, which is unfortunate because I'm really enjoying this. Uh,
Thank you.
if you were going to talk to authors about, kind of getting on a track that would mirror your career,
Mhm.
what's the first thing you think incoming writers now need to concentrate on? What should they know and what should they do?
Well, first of all, they've got to read a lot.
Hmm.
And I think you've got to read the books that you really like. If you want to write something like that, it's okay to imitate.
Yeah.
Don't start off that way. Um, but you'll eventually develop your own voice. It just takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm happy that you agreed to come on. I'm glad we got this chance to chat. Uh, I'm even glad that I got to hear you interviewed twice. That's a bonus for me.
Thank
Twice
you.
the wisdom. So, Oligarch's got a daughter is currently available. I think it released in
End of
January, I
January.
believe. Yeah.
Right.
So currently
Just
available in all the great places. You got a website? Anything you want to
I
push people to?
do. Website is josephfinder.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, all the platforms.
Excellent. Just go search Joseph Finder. I think I mispronounced your last name when we first started. I apologize
Everybody
for that.
does, and I stopped.
I figure, it's one of those things. I read it, and
Yeah,
so in my head, that's what it's pronounced as. And even though I've heard you say it out loud 100 times now, I still got it wrong. So,
not a problem.
all right, you have my permission to mispronounce my name in any way you wish. All right, Joseph Finder, thank you so much, sir, for being a part of the Wordslinger podcast.
Good to talk to you. Thank you.
Everybody else listening in, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. Make sure you stick around. We got the note at the end coming up. And as you know, to me, that is the podcast. So stick around for that, and we'll see you on the other side. I've always believed life's too short for boring stories. So I write the kind of books I'd want to read. Action-packed, fast-paced fiction. Adventure stories with characters you'll wish you could hang out with. And twists you'll never see coming. From ancient mysteries to modern day thrills, my books take you on a wild ride. And trust me, I've got plenty of rides to choose from. So if you're ready to escape into a world of danger, discovery, and intrigue, it's here waiting. Find your adventure at kevintumlinson.com/books. Not responsible for sleepless nights. Well, here we are at the note at the end. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Joseph Finder, and I hope you will pick up a copy of The Oligarch's Daughter. That's that word oligarch is just everywhere now. It's sort of one of those things where, like, I don't know what they call that when your reticular activating system gets engaged. And so you decide, I want to buy that. I want to buy a Ford Bronco, and so everywhere you look, there's Ford Broncos everywhere. I think that may be what's happening here. That term oligarch, before Fender wrote the book, I knew the term, I'd heard the term, I'd used the term, but it's like suddenly it became kind of a hot term with in politics, with Elon Musk and others kind of becoming involved in politics. So it is interesting to see how that sort of thing is shaping the world around us. Concepts like that. I'm seeing more and more of this for actually. Not just the concept of the oligarch, but just it's hard to put a finger on. It's like there's a kind of zeitgeist thing happening. It's bizarre. It's hard to describe when it comes. I really don't like politics much. I don't like following it much, but I get sucked in and kind of engrossed in some of it. And I think it's because, frankly, it's just there's a moment of change happening in the world. It goes beyond politics. I was thinking about this a lot with AI. I have some discussions. A good friend of mine now, Dave Cullen, he was a guest on the show. He wrote a book that you should read called Deus V Machina, another thriller novel, and it involves an exploration of AI and religion, which is really kind of fascinating. Make sure you check that out and check out his YouTube channel, The Dave Cullen Show. But the discussions we're having, like we're talking about, like just how alarming it can be to see some of the advances happening with AI. Like, for example, I have a little side podcast that I generate using Notebook LM from Google called the Deep Dive Novel After Show. Because Google set this up, and they have this, like, these two AI voices that will do an overview of whatever you upload to Notebook LM, and they do it in a podcast format. And I immediately grabbed all of those and started, putting them online on YouTube on my personal channel as a kind of review of the show. And there's these two like very natural sounding voices, male and female, discussing the manuscript. It's full of spoilers. I mean, so if you haven't read the books, I don't recommend encountering these first, unless you're just one of those people who just wants to know what they're getting into. But it's also full of hallucinations, I've noticed. Like there's little plot points and things that don't actually exist in the books. So it's been interesting. I actually generated one for JD for his book Dracul. I need to circle back around with him. I'm guessing it didn't do well. He was going to get back to me if it did well. I'm guessing it didn't do well on TikTok. I can understand why. I mean, it's sort of, unless you've got, so the sort of video component of the whole thing is what makes it work on platforms like TikTok or whatever. And in order to kind of do a video for him, I just generated a bunch of AI images and had them do a kind of Ken Burns effect on screen so that there would be some motion. Tested that. I want to hear how it did, but I suspect it didn't do well. But today, Dave Cullen sent me a link, and it's a guy who's talking about using, and gosh, I don't remember the name of the service he used, an AI to generate AI avatars for each of the characters. And so now you've got video of two human-looking characters interacting with each other with camera cuts between them, and paired and with lip sync to the AI voices. I'm not an alarmist when it comes to this kind of stuff. I actually embrace AI quite a bit. I think you're foolish not to. There's just tools. We're in that, like I said, we're in a moment of change. There's just tools that we are going to be leveraging in ways that we never even imagined before. So I'm not an alarmist. I don't think the AI is going to steal my job. I don't think it's going to replace me as a writer or as a podcaster, because despite the fact that it can do a very good job and it can sound very real and authentic, and it could pass even, depending on the content, I think. I believe that humans are just constantly seeking authenticity, and as good as the AI is, that's the one quality that it can't replicate. It can't be authentic because it's working from algorithms, it's working from programming. It can be generative, it can be predictive, it can even be somewhat autonomous, but at this point in our development, in our evolution, AI is not authentic. It doesn't feel authentic. It's sort of, to me, like the Notebook LM stuff, the podcast. I like it, and I like what I like the way it discusses my books. But to me, it feels it has that feeling of being like those infomercials from the 90s or whatever, where you had, they were on a set that was designed to look like a talk show. But you'd never heard of any of the people on this thing. It's got that look and feel. Sometimes they'd even throw in like a live studio audience or whatever. But it was clearly just a scripted marketing, piece. The person being interviewed had their talk points and was basically just pimping their products and whatever. Stuff like that is still around. I get calls from these groups all the time. They're kind of scuzzy in my opinion, but they pop up and they say, we came across your books and we were interested in booking you on an international television program, or a national television program. And one of them was actually, I forget who was involved. It's like Kiefer Sutherland or something was the host of this thing, but it just turned out that they were being paid to host this thing. You weren't even talking to them. You would just be a clip they play. They pre-recorded their intro and everything, and then it would cut to you doing an interview with some, intern or something, and it was just a commercial. And, those things, and it's, of course they want you to pay for that because as they told me, that kind of coverage is expensive, so we have to offset our cost. So even though we're a fully legit television program, wink, wink, we really can't afford to just put anyone on there, so you need to do your part. It's just, it's more of the same sort of scam like you see a lot with the there's these self-publishing companies that are predatory, that they're charging like, my father fell for one of these, unfortunately, but like $30,000. You pay $30,000 and we will publish your book and market your book and give you copies of the book. And, but it's everything they do is the same thing you could do for free. Like there's literally nothing they do for you for $30,000 or even $5,000 or even $100 that you couldn't go do for yourself at no charge. So beware, buyer beware. So anyway, this shift, the AI stuff, to me, there are things that are rapidly changing. One of the things I've been studying lately is con artists. Speaking of scams, I've been doing a deep dive into how con artists work and how they think, and I've been looking for case studies and finding quite a few. Right now, I'm currently, and I'm sorry, if you're watching on YouTube, like, I need to find a way to stabilize this microphone because every time I touch my desk, the whole thing wobbles. Maybe that's part of the charm. That's the authenticity of the show. Anyway, I'm currently kind of profiling a guy named Stephen Glass, who was a writer in the late 90s. He's my age. He's actually just under a month older than me. And he was a journalist, quote unquote. I use that term loosely. He was a writer. And in the end, he turned out to be kind of a very skilled fiction writer. But what he would do is fake his way into, he got a job with like the Republic magazine or something, New Republic or something like that. I don't remember. I don't follow that publication. But he started doing these embedded pieces, kind of gonzo journalism, similar to Hunter S. Thompson type thing. But he would embed himself with like, this group of young Republicans or this group of CEOs or whatever. And so he would do these really kind of hit pieces, and he became successful doing this. And he would branch out freelance. He was making pretty good money, and he became notable. But it turned out he was just making all this stuff up. And the final straw was a piece he did called Hacker Heaven in like 1998, where he claimed to go to like this hacker conference, and just in every single bit of at least most of his pieces, he included threads of truth, which made them difficult to refute. But in this particular piece, the final thing he ever wrote and published was a complete fabrication. So I say all that because he got busted, he got caught in this because of a shift that was happening in the 90s from print to digital. I don't know if you experienced this. I experienced this as a writer in the 90s, particularly that era, late 90s. There was this sort of, prejudice against online journalism and online writing. And I remember writing for the Houston Chronicle, and I was doing a blog for the Chronicle. They had a thing they called the Commons, which I kind of miss, but because frankly, that's where, Jenny Lawson, the bloggess, if you're familiar with her, she's a New York Times bestseller now. And I mean, she and I were both writers in the Commons, knew each other, hung out every now and then. She won't take my calls now, but hey. But we came up through that same platform. But I just remember having conversations. One I had with someone I deeply care about, who was a longtime print journalist. She had seen a lot of my stuff, but I really embraced that move into digital publishing. And I do remember, like, there were people at the Houston Chronicle who were like, this whole internet thing is a fad. It's going to go away. It's not real journalism. You're not a real writer. Just really looked down. And this person, whom I love dearly, she balked at the whole thing as well. Like, she didn't want to do any blogging or online writing because she felt it would hurt her career. She didn't see it as real journalism, didn't see it as real writing. Ironic now when you fast forward. It's easy to look back and wonder, like, what were they thinking? There were people who were part of the upper crust of the Houston Chronicle, the people really connected, the powerful, wealthy people who were behind that publication, who legitimately held on to this idea that that digital, that the internet was a fad, that it was going to go away. There was just no question that there's no point in, they literally at one point questioned why we were even putting the Chronicle on the internet, because no one cares. They thought no one wants to read their newspaper on a screen. They want to sit at their breakfast table with their orange juice, their coffee, their bagel, and they want to just open that paper and read the paper. And that's what people want. I don't think that's entirely wrong, but I do think it's short-sighted. I thought it was short-sighted at the time. But fast forward to now, it's hard to look back at that and think that was ever the attitude. But that change is what there's this moment. I remember feeling it at that time. I was by then working in radio and TV. One of the things we were doing was heavily embracing the internet. I worked for a radio show that was one of the first to actually have a streaming show online that you could tune in and listen to from your computer. It was difficult, challenging to pull it off, but also to listen to it. Video was a pipe dream at that point, but it was something we hoped for. And I don't know, I remember being in that moment. And then there was the .com bubble. If you're not familiar with that, go look that up, kids. And some people saw that and went overboard. One guy in particular I know bought like $2 million worth of .coms and would get investments from people just because they were .coms, because everyone was seeing it. Everyone saw that this internet thing was going to change the world. So there was that moment. It was this moment. And that shaped me as a writer, because I really saw, and as really honestly, I'd say that's probably right there in the mix of how and why I embraced self-publishing when I did, because I could see it. I could just see it. I think we're in another moment like that. I think that it's happening again, and this time, and just like during the .com bubble, there's a lot of investment in AI that I look at and like, but what is at the time I remember asking, what is it we're actually selling? When we get people to invest in our .coms, thousands of them at that point, but like any given .com, what are they getting for their investment? How do they get repaid for this investment? And there was no answer. There was really no answer to that. It was just that this was the hot new thing. This was the zeitgeist of the moment. This is the big change that's happening. We better get on board or we're going to get left behind. And in some ways they were absolutely right about that, but it was only the businesses that figured out how to treat the .com as a business. later I took that lesson and I realized that's applicable to publishing, self-publishing in particular. It was the authors who figured out how to treat publishing as a business, because when self-publishing started to explode, there were some people who made a lot of money off of it, but they were shells. They were just, it was empty, right? It was that, we still have some of this, I'm not going to crap over people who do low content books or whatever, but they, you can tell who's on a bubble that's going to burst by, going on YouTube and seeing how many people are pushing that as the newest, best get rich quick plan, right? Some of this is legit, man. I mean, publishing something like, here's a daily guided journal or whatever, it's a low content book, but it's got prompts and it's got, you put some work into it. I think that's legitimate. But the people who are doing things like, I'm just going to create a coloring book that's really just a bunch of clip art, or really just a bunch of AI black and white images, that it feels scammy to me. A lot of people making a lot of money from that. Anyway, there was a point in self-publishing though where, they were putting out not just the low content books, but there was one guy in particular. His name is John Locke. Just paid for a bunch of reviews, paid for, and got himself up there. And I followed that guy for a little while because I'm like, well, he's doing something right. And then when it kind of came out that he was kind of scamming people, or gaming the system, it was disappointing. But I had that same feeling during that period that I had during the .com bubble, and I've got that same feeling again now. Right now, there's a million companies doing everything AI. AI is going into everything. AI everywhere, right? Microsoft Word raised the price of its software because it added AI, which made me immediately cancel Microsoft Word, because I'm like, why am I even paying for Microsoft Word in the first place? But, raising the price by 33% immediately off the top, just because you decided you're adding AI and going to force that down my throat, that's problematic to me. But the other thing, the other piece, people are still figuring out what the best uses of AI are. And what I've been doing is using it for, I don't know, it's made it easier for me to do certain things. Like, okay, and I think this is key. I'm not trying to create an AI product because AI is the greatest and you need to buy it. I'm learning how to use AI to make my life easier. That's why I don't think AI is going to replace me as a podcaster or as a writer, because while it can do those things and do them pretty well, we come back to that authenticity piece, right? I've spent my career building up an audience that's listening for my voice, figuratively and literally, right? Like, you're tuned into these podcasts because you like my perspective. Maybe you like the sound of my voice. Maybe you just like the guests. I don't know. But there's a reason you tune in, and there's a reason people buy my books. They buy my books because they like the characters. They like the pacing. They like the style and the voice of the narration and everything. All that stuff is part of me as a brand, you'll say. But what AI has been doing for me is allowing me, like for this show, for example, there's pieces and bits that I've wanted to do for the past decade that were just too challenging for me to keep up on my own. But because of AI, it takes just a few seconds for me to generate some of that stuff. And I'm talking about things like, pull quote for the episode. Something as simple as that. Because it would mean each time, re-listen. I listen to the shows, but I generally listen back to the entire show after I've published it. Because I've got a lot of things to juggle, and it's too time consuming for me to sit and review an interview I did, a month ago, just to get a pull quote. I kind of skim it, scan it. I've even found a way around that. I'm kind of showing you how the sausage is made here, but I use an AI app now to listen to the show for me, get a transcript, give me the key topics so that I can review what the show is about, generate questions if I want to include questions, generate quotes, generate episode titles, generate YouTube descriptions, all that stuff from one app. The things that used to take me hours to do, now I do in a few minutes. It takes me longer to record the episode than it does for me to actually produce it now. And, at one point I was looking into handing all this off to somebody, but now it's sort of, why would I pay someone to take that on? Because I can do it in a few minutes, and maybe at some point I will actually hand things over to somebody. I have a VA now, and I have resources now, and there's certain aspects of this that I could hand over, and I plan to. But anyway, the point here is we're in another moment of change, and there's two things that happen in moments of change. You get two types of people. This is what I'm learning in my deep dive. You're going to understand how we looped back here in just a second, but there's one group that is in moments of change. That's when the world is most vulnerable to con artists, right? Think about it. The whole .com bubble thing I was talking about earlier, even though this guy didn't mean to, he was conning all these investors out of millions, because even though he believed in this .com thing and buying up as many as possible and turning it into, a network or whatever, he didn't have a business plan for how to do that and how these investors got their money back. So he effectively conned them out of millions. I think the same sort of thing is happening now. The same sort of thing happened with self-publishing. Con men came along and did their thing, and took advantage of readers, took advantage of all kinds of people, took advantage of writers too, because that's where you had all these scammy, predatory services emerge. And I think the same thing is happening now with the AI world. You've got a bunch of con artists who are figuring out ways to use this change that's happening in the world to take advantage of people and line their own pockets. So that's group one. And group two are the innovators. Because during the .com bubble, you had people who figured out, I got to create something. It can't just have a label like .com on it and remain viable. It has to produce something that the world finds valuable. And so you had Amazon.com and Google.com, and you just had this Yahoo and America Online and just on and on and on at the 90s. And that has continued to evolve from there. And so the .com doesn't matter anymore. That's no longer a mark of quality or anything. There's nothing inherently good about a .com anymore. However, now you've got entire businesses, empires that are entirely based on the internet, and the innovators created that. In self-publishing, same thing. You had people come along who helped redefine and shape the landscape. Guys like Hugh Howey, there were Amanda Hawking was an early, pioneer. She's since become traditionally published. I remember at that time reading articles from her, like when she transitioned to a traditional contract. Everyone was outraged, calling her a sellout, and she answered that by saying, I never got into this to be the one who did all the work. I wanted the traditional contract. This is what I got into this for. Self-publishing was a road to that. I think that's the right approach. I don't necessarily mean you should get into self-publishing with the intention of going into traditional publishing. I think the reality of this is you should figure out what it is you actually want, and then use the tools you can get your hands on to get to where you want to be. And for some people, that means I want a self-publishing empire. Like Joanna Penn, she's self-publishing all the way, and she's got, her game is figured out. She's doing direct sales. There's a bunch of stuff she's doing, and I think she's nailed what she wants, and she's continuously growing that. But then there are others. Andy Weir is a good example, who self-published, but they as soon as they were offered a contract to join a publisher, have an editor, have the trappings of a traditional publishing world, they did it. I'm in a transition right now where, I enjoy some success as a self-publisher, but I'm doing some things that are more in the traditional world now, and it's causing me to kind of circle back and reevaluate and figure out, like, is this something I want for myself? What do I want? What do I really want? And how do I get there? And the great news for me is because of the work I did as a self-publisher and growing myself and improving myself in that field, I have a little more leverage than the first time I tried to get a traditional deal. So that benefits me. So that's the other thing, you want to learn from these experiences. As far as AI, I think it's the people who are going to step back from trying to figure out, how do I scrape as much money off the world as possible without, actually producing anything. The folks who are just leveraging AI as a kind of hustle, I think the real innovators are going to start emerging soon. I'm already seeing some of that. I'm already seeing a lot of that. For example, Cameron Sutter at Plotter. Plotter has created something called StorySnap, which is an AI tool for writers that I have helped consult on. That I think is great, and is a very useful tool. And I think I think it integrates well with the rest of what they're doing. So you can check that out. I don't know if they probably have the URL storysnap.com, maybe. But if you go to Plotter, PLOTTR.com, send an email. Send an email to them and say, hey, Kevin Tumlinson said I should ask you about StorySnap. I'm probably going to start pushing that as a kind of affiliate or something. I really think it's cool. And I've just been asked by Pro Writing Aid to kind of evaluate something they've done that I think is kind of similar, actually, but it's it's aimed more because they're a sponsor of the show, so I'm happy to look at anything they send. But I also kind of believe in them as a company. So this is what I'm starting to see is the good actors, the good faith folk are starting to step up and create and innovate in the AI space in a way that that I think will inevitably drown out the scammers. I believe in that. And that's why I'm not worried about AI taking my job. Because I've been through this like 4 times now in my career. I've had my career shaped and rebooted so many times by technological innovation. It's hard to look back and not see a pattern. So anyway, the point is, I guess, if we're going to round this off with a point, a moral to this note at the end, is during times of change, be aware that there's people who are going to take advantage of you. The con artists are out there looking for this time of change. So be on high alert, question everything, but also be aware and on the lookout for the true innovators. And you'll recognize the difference because the innovators, you can see what they're doing that benefits their clientele, their customer, as well as their company and as well as society. You'll be able to see it. It won't just be lip service. You'll know a tree by its fruit, right? Look for the fruit. And also, during this time of change, you can be that innovator even if it's just, I'm going to look for tools that help me do my work better. That's a form of innovation that can help shape your work and your career and make life better for both you and your audience, your readers, your customers, whoever they happen to be. So that's it. That's the moral. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. I think we may have gone kind of long. I do that sometimes. Bless you out there. This times of change can be challenging all around. There's a lot of churn happening politically, worldwide. It's a great time, honestly. We're right at the beginning of something. I think an amazing era for human history. I've seen this before, and I'm excited to be a part of it again. I'm glad I'm here. Make sure that you are, wherever you are, that you are subscribing to the Wordslinger podcast on podcast platforms wherever you listen, but also on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/Wordslinger podcast, I believe that's the URL. Catch me on that. I always forget if I shortened it, if it's longer. There will be a link below, but you can find the show at wordslingerpodcast.com. That's probably easier, but make sure you like, share, subscribe on YouTube and elsewhere, and check out wordslingerpodcast.com, where you can reach out to me if you want. You can also, that's where you can find my Substack and other useful things. Be a part of my sphere, my growth as I embrace this time of change. I'm trying to be an innovator in this space as well. I'm not out to create the next AI tool. I'm just out to find the best way to use those tools to help me live out my plans, my goals and dreams. And I think you can do the same. If you want to talk about it, I'm happy to chat about it with you. Go over to wordslingerpodcast.com and reach out to me. So that's going to do it for this week's Wordslinger podcast. Glad you're here. I really am. I really am legitimately glad to have you here each week. I do this stuff. Sometimes I just do it because I feel compelled. I just feel like sometimes there's no real advantage to me to do this show, honestly. And then sometimes I realize, well, the advantage is that I do have a community of folks like you out there, and we get to communicate and share this stuff every week, and it's an honor. So take care of yourselves. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.